On today's edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast, we have a what's more likely game for the offense and defensive side of the football, talking about scenarios that could play out in 2024.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in, Eagles fans, to this Tuesday edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast. I'm Louis DiBiase, joined as always by my co-host Gino Camilleri. Today's edition of the show is brought to you by GameTime. Download the app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. I want to get into a fun game that I came up with today with Gino that, of course, it's the dead zone of the offseason, so there's not much to talk about. DeVante Parker yesterday announced his retirement, so we went into wide receiver 3 options, who the Eagles could trade for, who they could sign. But, Gino, overall right now, this is when we really just take a bigger picture look at 2024. The roster is not set, but it's pretty set in stone now. There's not a lot of holes in this roster in offense and defense, so wanted to go over some scenarios with you that could play out on offense and defense, because the thing is, there's a lot of hype about this team, but 2023 does exist, and they need to. This isn't after the 2022 season where you're trying to run back a Super Bowl run. Like, they need to overcome some demons that they had last year. And so I thought some scenarios I want to get into today that could play out.
The crazy thing is, you say that we're in like this dead zone, but it's like OTAs start tomorrow, and then we're going to have a couple sessions of OTAs, and then
from a news perspective, like there's not any roster moves probably going.
Oh, definitely so. But you always got to stay on your toes. It is Howie season. We're still going to be here each and every day.
Maybe there is no dead zone with the Eagles. Yeah.
No, I mean, just go back through our 7 years hosting this show, man.
True.
I mean, you could see that we're doing shows 365. So keep subscribing. But right now, what Howie Roseman is doing is, like you said, taking that 30,000-foot approach at this roster, because come Wednesday, the first time that all of these guys are going to be on the field, including the rookies, including the UDFAs, the veterans will be there. These guys will be on the practice field. No, they're not going to be out there in pads. It's just going to be shells and jerseys. But at the same time, we're going to get a good idea of how things stand when it comes to who's up first in drills, what team sessions look like, who's with the first group, the second group, third group. And right now, there's not as many question marks as there were, I would say, last year with the defense. The offense has been pretty steady over the last couple of years. But this year, some of those depth type of decisions are really going to be where things come into play. And it might not be the top heavy positions, like who's going to get CB1 type of reps, but who's going to get CB2 through 7 types of reps moving forward.
And, I wanted to get into the defensive side of the football to start the show, because I think there's more questions on that side of the ball than offense, because there's a lot less proven talent there. It's very young, a lot of first and second round picks from your last 3 draft classes. So I want to play a game with you. It's called What's More Likely. I'm going to pull up 2 scenarios that could play out this year. What do you think is more likely? We'll start with the defensive side of the football. Question 1. What's more likely? Nakobe Dean becomes a top-tier, every down green dot linebacker in 2024, or Jordan Davis takes a Dexter Lawrence-like step as a pass rusher and an elite run stopper that you can rely on all 3 downs. So basically, who of that 2022 class from that Georgia defense do you think takes a almost star-like step this year?
To say that Jordan Davis could hit that Dexter Lawrence level, I think would be a little bit unfair to Jordan Davis right now, because Dexter Lawrence,
you traded up for him into the top 15 in the first round 3 years ago. I think
it's totally fair. He's got to make that jump into year 3, because as we always say, it takes about 3 years to decide if these guys have hit what you expected them to be or are on that trajectory. I would say the safer bet is probably... It's tough, because if Nakobe Dean is on the field, I would say that's a safer bet.
Sure.
The injury concern, that's up in the air
That's
as well.
That's why I brought this up. I thought it was a tough back and forth.
Jordan Davis, you saw him down at the Eagles autism ride. It looked like he has dropped a ton of weight.
Looks very like he's slim.
Very good. I know it's that time of the offseason where everybody's in the best shape of their life, but he truly does look like he's in better playing shape.
He needs to stay in shape in November and December. That's always the question.
This is like a 51-49 type of scenario for me. And I'll say Jordan Davis. I think
Okay.
because we have seen flashes of pure dominance from him,
Yes.
where Nakobe Dean, I think you've seen a pretty good floor, pretty solid level of production when he is on the football field. But Jordan Davis, you have seen those couple times where when he's fully healthy and he can get his foot into the ground, create some leverage and just move guys from point A to B. And you're like, oh, that's why they traded up for the guy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go with the big dog in Jordan Davis.
I actually agree with you, and I've been somebody that doubts Jordan Davis will ever become an every down defensive tackle you can rely on to be he's never going to be a double-digit sack guy that's also an elite run stopper. I just don't think I don't know. I don't think that's maybe realistic, but at the same time, the first few months of the season, the first 2 years of his career, Gino, he's been an elite run stopper. PFF had him as like the number 1 run stopping tackle for the first 8 to 10 weeks of the season. The issue is he's always in shape this time of the year in the beginning of the season, but it never lasts, right? It lasts normally like 9 weeks. He gets injured, he gets out of shape, and that's when the pass rushing really doesn't hold up. But if you look at his tape against New England, Minnesota, Tampa Bay, if you look at the early games last year, he actually did look like he developed as a pass rusher. So I like Nakobe Dean a lot. I love his Georgia tape from a few years ago, but it would be really hard for me to say it's more likely that Nakobe would become that guy over Jordan, even though I have my Davis doubts, because you've at least seen some floor on tape with Davis. And Nakobe, you just have seen nothing because of the injuries. So it's very hard to project what he's going to be this year.
And is he going to hold up at
Right.
that projection for 17 to 20 games that you're hoping on playing him? Because there's been shows, and you can go back, that we have seen Nakobe Dean have flashes like I just said with Jordan Davis. I wouldn't say to that level.
No, but like the Titans game in 2022, he came out there and instantly made like 5 straight.
Perfect
plays.
example, Lou. That's the exact game I was going to bring up, where you're seeing him like he's plugging gaps instantly. He was making plays out to the sideline where we're like, oh, okay, this is why they drafted this kid in the 3rd round.
Right.
It makes perfect sense. But at the same time, the best availability is reliability, and you have to be on the football field. And if Jordan Davis can hold up, if Nakobe Dean can hold up, I would still say Jordan Davis has that higher ceiling, in my opinion, because if I'm going to bank on one of them, I'm going to bank on the unicorn, not the undersized linebacker.
I agree. All right, here's another one for you. What is more likely? Keely Ringo, Isaiah Rodgers, or Eli Ricks develops as a starting outside corner for the Eagles, and Cooper DeJean is used more as a star slot safety type of role player for this defense, or Cooper DeJean is that long-term CB2 opposite Quinyon Mitchell. Which one do you think is more likely for this defense long-term?
Former rather than the latter.
Yeah, I think I agree, actually, with that. So you're saying you think one of the other 3 will become the outside guy?
I think there's a better chance. I think that in the long term,
I think that's the scenario they want to play out.
When I'm watching Cooper DeJean play football at Iowa, and I am projecting him out into what I see him as in a Vic Fangio type of defense, I see him in, say what you want about what the Dolphins players said about Vic, but I see him in a Javon Holland, a Justin Simmons type of role where this
you
guy
had him ranked as a safety in the draft.
Yeah,
right?
he was my top guy there. If you're going to take a stab on anybody, it's the versatile player who can play inside and out. You talked about him playing that star/overhang position. I think it's only going to be to their benefit that he excels there. And if he is an outside corner and he could play there, Lou, then, I mean, I'll be happy to eat that crow and say, yeah, you landed Quinyon Mitchell and him to be that outside corner. And it's a luxury now that you have Keely and Isaiah Rodgers and Ricks, and you can do whatever you want with them, whether it's trading them or using them as another rotational piece, because you know that you need 7 of these guys in the building. But at the end of the day, Cooper DeJean, with how he's able to tackle, his football IQ, his range, his playmaking ability to get to the football in the air, it just projects too much to me, in my opinion, to what we were saying for years with Rasul Douglas, but this guy truly does fit that mold.
I totally agree. I think DeJean is a higher floor as a corner than those other players, but I think they would want the scenario to play out that Ringo, Rodgers, or Ricks pans out to be at a starting outside corner. And I think at least one of them, I'm not saying all 3 are going to do it, Gino, but I think one of the 3 will be that guy so they can use DeJean in a way where, like you said, I think his ceiling is utilized more than his floor. And that's more as a safety slot star.
Let
type
him
of
see the
hybrid
field.
player.
Let him read the quarterback's eyes. Let him make plays on the football.
Yes.
Let him and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson truly do
Agreed.
what you have seen when you've had great seasons, and that's have two very good safeties who can patrol that back end, who can come up and plug at the alley when need be, can be pseudo linebackers. And that's, I think, pigeonholing him into cornerback would be the wrong decision. He's a chess piece, and you have to use him like a queen on a chessboard.
And it's not a knock on him because I think he can be a very good outside corner. I agree. I just think his skill set I think he can maximize his talents at those other spots, as do you. So I agree with you there as well. Today's episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast is brought to you by GameTime with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. GameTime takes the guesswork out of buying NFL tickets. The NFL schedule is officially out. For me, I like to go to at least 2 home games in Philadelphia every year and a road game. I'm circling that New Orleans game the 3rd week of September to get down to the Superdome. I want to go to the Browns game and the Panthers game as well at Lincoln Financial Field. I'm going to those games through GameTime, where you can save up to 60% buying sports tickets, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. Plus, you can make sure your seat is great with a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL. You're going to get $20 off your first purchase on your Eagles tickets. Terms do apply. Again, create an account, redeem that code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Plus, again, concerts. It's summertime. Concerts are a big thing right now. Comedy, I love stand-up comedy, as is Gino. Theater events. My girlfriend's a big theater person. She's definitely a theater kid. We're going through GameTime no matter what this summer. Download the GameTime app. Again, create that account and get $20 off. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. I got another one for you on the defensive side of the football. What's more likely in 2024? Nolan Smith is the Eagles' best pass rusher, or Sidney Brown becomes the Eagles' best safety. So neither one is projected to be even a top 2 player at their position, because you've got Bryce Huff and Josh Sweat, even Brandon Graham on the edge, and Jaylus Hunt. Sidney Brown is going to be behind right now Chauncey Gardner-Johnson and Reed Blankenship, but if there was a scenario that played out where one of these guys is your most reliable player at this position at the end of 2024, who do you think that would be? And I don't think it's likely that either one is, but if there was one, like for me, Gino, I almost think it would be Sidney Brown. I love his skill set. I think when he's healthy, Reed Blankenship is a solid player with a high floor, but I don't think the ceiling's as high as Brown. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson was great in 2022. There's an injury history there, though. If one played out, I kind of like Sidney Brown there.
With the question that we just asked with Reed, how much is he going to take away the opportunity for Sidney Brown to take some of those coverage snaps?
Sure.
Or is Sidney Brown going to be just truly a free safety on the back end that can use his range? And they're truly concerned about, I would say, a tackling quote unquote issue that isn't really an issue. It's just figuring out where to break down and not over pursuing on that back hip.
Right.
But Nolan Smith, I think he's going to be used more of that overhang edge style player who's asked to protect the flat, asked to go out and defend running backs in coverage, and the guy who's going to be that pass rusher off the other side is going to be one of the big 3. But Nolan is still going to have his opportunities. He's just too good of an athlete, like we were saying with Reed, to just say, okay, go rush the passer, Nolan Smith. Like, they drafted him for a reason. He is that hybrid player, that guy who he's a little bit undersized at the edge position. He's a little bit oversized at linebacker, but he does have that all-world athleticism where you saw sparks out of him last year where he did start to look like a 3-down player at the point of attack against the run. He was starting to hold his own. And you see times where when they dropped him into coverage, he was much better than Hassan Riddick. And I would much rather drop him than a Bryce Huff, who you had played all that money for to go and rush the quarterback. And same with Josh Sweat. So I'm going to go with Nolan Smith. I'm going to go with I'm just riding the Georgia guy's heart. I mean, Nakobe Dean is the one I was a little down on, but it was 51-49.
And you picked Jordan Davis as a Georgia guy, too. So you're sticking with the Bulldogs. One more for you on defense. What's more likely? Devin White returns to an all-pro or a high-end 2020 to 2022 form with the Eagles, or Milton Williams finally breaks out with a full-time role on the Eagles' defensive line on the interior Which one? White returning to form or Milton Williams breaking out?
Milton Williams, and I think one of two things is going to happen with him. He's either one, going to play so well that by week 10 we hear rumblings that they're working on a contract extension for him,
Right.
or he's going to play himself into one of the biggest offseason contracts, like a Javon Hargrave type of situation.
I hope
where
that's the scenario
he just
that
gets
plays
priced out of Philadelphia, which
It'll
I
be
would
better
rather
for the
extend him.
Eagles. It's better for the Eagles, Gino, if Milton breaks out versus Devin White, I'd say.
Oh, 100%. I mean, Devin White, it's a one-year deal. You know that you don't really have an answer at that second linebacker position right now.
Yeah.
Yes, you did draft Junior at that second position. Is he going to step in right away and be the guy? I don't know about that. Zach Cunningham, is he going to potentially sign back closer towards training camp? Ben Van Summeren isn't really going to push the pace, but Milton Williams has shown that he can be a premier pass rusher in this league, and that's what they're looking for. 3-tech who can, one, be very stout against the run, and now without Fletcher Cox, he's going to see the biggest bump in snaps, in my opinion.
I agree, and I'm really a big fan of the Devin White signing. When it first came out that they brought him in, I really wasn't a big fan because he got benched last year and thought the best of Devin White was in the past during that Super Bowl year with Tom Brady and the Buccaneers. But overall, the more I think about it, the more I look at his skill set and how it fits with Vic Fangio and the upside of it, I really like the idea of Devin White bouncing back this year. But even if he does, I think the ceiling for Milton Williams is higher. And I don't think Milton, Gino, has showed anything over the last few years, even in limited snaps, I would say, he can't take on more. I feel like anytime he's been on the football field, the dude makes plays. He was one of the best players on the field in your playoff game against Tampa Bay. And even early on in the year, PFF had him as a overall top 5 run-stopping tackle along with Jordan Davis. And he has more pass rushing ability than Davis. So I'm with you. I actually think it's Milton.
He might be the biggest beneficiary of, one, Fletcher Cox
retiring.
Two,
Yeah, for sure.
them not drafting anybody at that position.
Yeah.
And 3, them not signing anybody at that position. It's got to be a lot of trust in him right now, and Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter.
They almost
take
need
on
him
that
to take
role.
a step. You know, if Jordan Davis has not become a Dexter Lawrence type player this year, which, like you said, might be a little unfair, then they really need Milton to break out.
100%. And for their greater benefit of the whole defense, you hope he takes that next step to a player that you might win some games because of, which that role in Philadelphia, it's a big role, man. And you've seen how important Fletcher Cox was for that team, how important Javon Hargrave was, why they invested in Jalen and Jordan Davis. And Milton Williams, they invested a 3rd-round pick in him, man. And I would like to see him get a second contract because that's a top 100 player that I don't want to see walk out the door.
No, totally agree. Let's continue what's more likely on the offensive side of the football coming up next right here on this Tuesday edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast. Today's episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast were brought to you by FanDuel. It's winner take all time in the NBA and the NHL. FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 back in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 back to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. I love basketball. I've been betting a lot on the NBA. I took the over on Anthony Edwards .4. I took the Timberwolves money line. I've been betting a lot on Minnesota this year. Didn't think that was going to work out against Denver after they won game 3 and 4 and 5, and they were up 3-2. I thought, okay, those first 2 games were a mirage. I got too into the Anthony Edwards hype, but no, I stuck to it through FanDuel, and I won big thanks to the T-Wolves. You can do the same through the NBA and the NHL by visiting FanDuel.com/lockedon to make every playoff shot count. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook and the official sports betting partner of the Locked On Podcast Network and the Locked On Eagles podcast. Thanks so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Guys, are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Got to turn down the volume because of all the shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're continuing what's more likely for 2024. This time we're going to flip sides of the field, go to offense. Gino, what's more likely in 2024 for the Eagles? And I want to start with wide receiver 3 after one day removed from DeVante Parker announcing his retirement. Do you think it's more likely that Anais Smith, Paris Campbell, or Johnny Wilson really step up as that third receiving target for the Birds at the wide receiver position? Of course, not ahead of Dallas Goedert or Saquon Barkley, but at this position, or a wide receiver not on the team currently is their third most effective pass catcher at wide receiver.
I still think we're counting out Britton Covey when we shouldn't be.
My bad. All right, I'll throw Britton Covey in there.
I think we got to respect his ability to.
I just haven't seen it at all. He's like literally never done it.
No, for sure, and hopefully we do. Hopefully we see a little bit of competition here coming up in the next couple months. I would say that it's probably one of those 3 guys that you had mentioned. I would probably say Smith is going to be that guy that his skill set is going to be the easiest to kind of translate and get him on the field right away. And heck, even throw Will Shipley in consideration there as well as like another gadget type of player to just get the ball in his hand. But Smith, with everything that DeVante and AJ Brown are going to give defenses, and now you have to worry about Saquon, and now you got to worry about Dallas Goedert as well. Is this kid just going to forgotten about in coverage, and his 4.3 type of speed, play speed just takes off the top every single time, and he's somebody who could track the ball, and you just put the ball in his hand, and he has 5 or 6 touchdowns as a rookie because everybody else has their eyes on everybody else underneath, which is more than likely going to happen.
No, I agree with you. And I think, and I'm not saying one of them is going to be more reliable than if you brought in a Hunter Renfrow or, I don't know, Mecole Hardman, or you traded for an Alec Pierce, all the options that I talked about in yesterday's show. I don't know if one of them in a vacuum in 2024 would be more effective, but all of them combined, Gino, I think all of them can be as effective as Quez Watkins was the last few years, or OZ, or Julio Jones. Yeah, I'm not saying one of them is going to instantly have 700 yards this year and push Dallas Goedert and Saquon Barkley to be that third target in the passing game. But all of them combined, I think, have different skill sets and a high enough floor with a lot of potential where they'll be just fine. Because like you said, they're not asking them to be what Greg Ward was asked to be in 2019 when there was no other receivers, or Travis Fulgham was asked to be in 2020. Like you mentioned, I mean, this is basically the 5th or 6th passing target in this offense. So I think there are some really good options actually out there right now at receiver, but Anais Smith, Johnny Wilson, and Paris Campbell were all players I liked better this year to be more effective than DeVante Parker. I'm just concerned about if Brown or Smith got hurt, who's your boundary starter? Mm-hmm. But when it comes to who's the effective third guy, I'm comfortable with the 3 guys they've got.
As long as the top 2 are healthy, and the big question is if one of them goes down.
Or Goddard. Goddard really needs to stay healthy too.
I can't believe that they didn't draft another guy there. Like,
it is crazy how much they almost ignored tight end, Gino. Like, outside of CJ Uzomah, that was your only move?
You got to hope that he does stay healthy. But if he does, you know what you're going to get out of this offense.
Yeah.
But at the same time, this is a true committee approach out of all of those guys. And you'll probably see Saquon line up in the slot at times. And Kellen Moore is somebody who loves to move the pieces around, unlike Brian Johnson, where he just put the guys out on the playing board and didn't move his battleships around. Kellen Moore is going to use motion, and you're going to be able to play matchups with all of these guys. And that's what it should be. It should be, you have your starting 5 from an NBA perspective, but we need our bench to go and win matchups. Like, it might be your 6th man one week in Johnny Wilson, and then your 7th man, Anais Smith, steps up the following week, and Paris Campbell the week after that. It's not going to be just one guy like they were relying on Quez Watkins to be. And I think it's for the betterment of all of them, because if you do rely on a guy like Quez Watkins and he fails, well, you get the outcome of last year. But if you have 3 guys and you at least potentially could get one hot hand, 3 of them, well, then you're sitting pretty, and at least you can make a run, hopefully, with one of those guys there.
All right, here's one for you. What's more likely, Nick Sirianni in 2024 wins Coach of the Year, or he's fired halfway through the season?
Wow.
Because I don't know if he's, because of how much credit the Eagles coordinators get with Sirianni, because he doesn't call plays. Even if they win 14 games, is he going to win Coach of the Year? He didn't win it in 2022. Why would he win it now? that's why I brought this up, because even if he's one of the best coaches in the league, I don't know if even Doug Peterson never won the award when I thought he should have in 2018.
The Coach of the Year award it's weird how
that's
they
why I
vote
brought
on
it up,
at
because it
times.
makes it tougher, because the voting process is strange.
I would say he's probably any coach in Philadelphia. Like, you're always closer to being fired than you are to being like a Hall of Famer. I think that's
probably,
that's just one way to look at it. But Nick Sirianni's level that he would have to get to obtain that Coach of the Year is almost like a perfect level, in my opinion, where
okay. Yeah, sure.
If he didn't win it the year where he has the best performance,
then when's he going to win it?
When is he going to win it, right? Like, you'd have to get like a Dolphins undefeated type of season, like an 85 Bears type of run where you just dominate everybody and it's not even close, and
I agree with you.
Best Patrick Mahomes, like, you
I
would
think
have
it's
to
more
say,
likely
simply because of that he's closer to getting fired. Yeah,
I agree. I think it's more likely that he get fired, and the Eagles really don't do that a lot. The last time they fired a coach in season was Chip Kelly, of course, week 16, and then Patrick Shermer took over. They normally don't do it, especially halfway through the year. This is where a scenario that kicks in where they just can't get over last year's collapse and the same stuff continues, and they're like, okay, we need to make a change and get ahead of next year's coaching search instantly. But again, like, I think it's more likely Sirianni is a really good coach this year than he gets fired. But that's why I brought up Coach of the Year, because of the responsibilities we don't know what he has versus other coaches across the NFL. That has the NFL, unfortunately, whether you agree with it or not, the process is very heavy towards, they lean towards the new coach that calls plays. That's normally who they give the award to. I'm thinking like
Dave Canales of Carolina. He goes
Matt Nagy,
8-9 or 9-8 and makes the playoffs and turns them around from that number one pick, and that's exactly a team that would
or the Tampa Bay coach.
100%. You're banging on.
I'm sorry, that's Todd Bowles. He went to Carolina. My bad. Yeah, we're talking about
Canales. Yep. Yes. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, your average, just typical, looks like Nick Sirianni type of guy. They all kind of look like they're built in a factory. But because of that, Lou, it's like, would he have to get to perfection or get fired? And getting fired as an Eagles coach is,
I think so too.
You're always one wrong door being open to get there.
All right, I got a couple more for you on offense. What's more likely? Lane Johnson retires at the end of 2024, or he plays for another 3 years through another contract?
I would say another 3 years.
I agree.
I think he's a guy who,
after hearing Baldy talk, I think Lane's going to play a lot longer than I thought originally.
The way he's kind of changed up how he's prepared each season to understand his body the best is something that's why he's a pro. At the same time, he's taking care of his mental health. He's a big proponent of that as well. It seems like he still loves the game, and it's not like Jason Kelce where you've heard whispers of him wanting to retire. With Lane Johnson, it's just like, oh, he's been playing for a decade plus, so it's got to happen at some point, right? But 3 years as an offensive tackle, I mean, if JP did it, the Eagles, they're going to let these guys play, and Lane Johnson's like one phone call away at any time, where it's with Jason Kelce that if he gets sent a couple kegs of beer, he might just pick it up right at the end of training camp if he doesn't want to show up one year and say, all right, I'll be back for another run.
Yeah, I think, in reading articles over the years, and Lane Johnson's, sometimes he was absent from the team and took a step away during the season. And we know Lane was very open about his anxiety and just a lot of things that were going on in his career. I thought he would be someone that calls it quits. However, he's aged so well and he's been so good for so long. And then you hear Brian Baldinger, who's very close with Lane, say, there's no reason to think Lane's going to be done in a year or two. Like, this guy can play as long as a Jason Peters did. And I think Lane Johnson is, I don't know. I mean, he's been quiet on that front over the last few years, so it's hard to tell what he really wants to do. But I think the way he's playing right now and the lack of injuries say, again, yes, like that anxiety and the mental part of it's a huge part of, DeVante Parker, and not to say that was any part of it, but he wanted to spend more time with his family. He's gone through a lot of injuries. Like, it's understandable why guys call it early, but there's no hint right now, Gino, like you said, that outside of him just being over 30, that he's going to call it quits. Like, offensive linemen can age really well, and he's aging very well. So I'd say I lean more towards he's going to play another 3+ years.
And at the same time, Quinyon Mitchell might have been our answer to this question because they didn't draft an offensive tackle and somebody to sit behind Lane Johnson.
Second round, the third. They didn't take one until day 3. That's a great point. It's a great hint.
I think he's going to stick around for a little bit longer.
I agree. All right, one more question for you here. What's more likely? We're going to talk about the third and fourth top passing targets for the Eagles offense. Saquon Barkley leads the Eagles in rushing touchdowns, which is really tough with Jalen Hurts on this offense.
Oh, that's a good question.
He has more receptions than Dallas Goedert, who's been normally the third passing target behind DeVante Smith and A.J. Brown. I tried to make these as hard as possible.
That might be the hardest one because you always have the vulture element of Jalen Hurts.
If you get like DeAndre Swift went down to the 2 or 1 yard line almost every time last year.
But at the same time, DeAndre Swift was at the bottom of the league when it came to any yards after contact, where Saquon Barkley is at the top of the league when it comes to anybody trying to tackle him, him being a literal Yeti and just bouncing off guys. He could be somebody that, you give him the ball to protect Jalen Hurts in those situations. But at the same time, Kellen Moore loves to throw to his running backs, man.
He does.
Saquon could be.
And the injuries of Goddard, too. Like the injury history of Goddard makes it tough.
Does Saquon Barkley have more receiving touchdowns than he does rushing touchdowns?
I think so.
Because that I could legitimately see where he takes 4 screens to the house. He takes a couple Texas routes, and he's just a guy who can win in those areas where he just has to beat one guy in the open field because you're pulling 3 guys on a screen where the Giants didn't have that ability.
Can I make that bet on FanDuel? I would love to make that bet on FanDuel.
Yeah, I would love to see if those odds are out there. But I think it's tough with the rushing versus Jalen Hurts. I still think Jalen, he's the poacher. You trust him.
Receiving. I think he would have more receptions because of the Jalen Hurts factor, and who's going to be healthier this year to run the ball, and the fact that Dallas Goedert does not stay healthy. And Kellen Moore loves to use his running backs. I lean receptions. So,
and with the evolution of Jalen Hurts, you hope that check down continues to be a progression in his offense where it's like, okay, nothing's
I think it will be with
Give
Kellen.
the ball to Saquon Barkley. Let's not panic here.
No, I totally agree. All right, guys, that's going to do it for today's edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast. Thanks so much for making us your first listen each and every day. We got 3 more shows for you, though, Wednesday through Friday this week. For Gino Camilleri, though, signing off for now, I'm Louis DiBiase. Thanks so much, as always, for downloading, watching, and listening, and let's go Birds.
Fly, Eagles, fly.